right. So we're back and diving into another chapter of Objections Overruled. And this time it's chapter 17. This one is all about something I know a lot of people struggle with, and I get asked about it a lot too. Can we actually ever really know reality, or is everything just like, up for interpretation? It's a question that's kind of plagued thinkers for centuries, and it feels more relevant now than ever, right? So to really sort of unpack this, we're going to take a trip back in time. We'll go through different periods of history and see how people thought about truth. And I think you'll find some of this pretty interesting. First off, the pre-modern era. Think like kings and castles, authority figures like kings and popes had so much power, and they often used religion to justify it. Back then, the king's word was basically law. Like it says in Ecclesiastes 8, verse 2 to 4, you've got to obey the king's command because you're oath to God. But this whole idea of absolute power, well, it had some pretty major downsides. It's like that famous saying, power tends to corrupt. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. And sometimes the Bible got dragged into it. People misused it to support systems that were really oppressive. And you could see how some people ended up rejecting both the Bible and the authority figures because of that. So now picture the pendulum swinging in the opposite direction, right? Away from this absolute authority. That takes us to the modern period. It was all about reason and individual freedom, a total reaction against all those rigid traditions of the past. But here's the thing. This emphasis on individual experience will send some people down a pretty dark path, a path towards nihilism, which is basically the belief that nothing really has any inherent meaning. Unless you personally experience it, it just doesn't count. And this led to some tricky questions about morality. If there's no such thing as absolute truth, then how in the world do we figure out right from wrong? Some people tried to base it on like collective preferences, like whatever the majority decides, that's what's right. But history shows us pretty clearly that could be a dangerous game. Think about it. Apartheid and South Africa's civil rights movement here in the US both involve groups saying our preferences should determine morality. And that's obviously not a good way to build a fair and just society. So even with all this progress in science and tech, this modern way of thinking rejecting absolute truth, it kind of led to this moral relativism, and it left a lot of people feeling pretty lost. Like we traded one set of problems for another, and then postmodernism comes along, and things they get even more interesting because this period just tosses out any of those big ideas, those grand narratives as they call them, or any claim to objective truth. It's all about having lots of perspectives and interpretations, and on the surface that might sound open-minded and all, but it's not really that straightforward. I mean, think about it. If every single interpretation is equally valid, how do we actually make judgments about anything? So it makes you wonder, if there isn't some objective truth, what are we even left with? I want to just stop here for a second and ask you, do you really truly believe that nothing can be known for sure? Like, seriously, think about it. 2 plus 2 equals 4 gravity. We know these things just intuitively through our own experiences. Sure, scientific knowledge, it's always being refined and updated. Maybe absolute certainty is something we can never fully grasp, but that doesn't mean there aren't objective truths that we can count on. It's all about finding that balance. And okay, let's bring the Bible back into this conversation because the chapter makes a really strong case for its historical accuracy. And I think it's important to talk about this directly because some of those postmodern doubts, they can sneak in when we think about Scripture. But here's the key point. A lot of the accounts of the Bible, they're backed up by sources that aren't even Christian, which is huge. It means we're not dealing with some isolated text that's just floating around out there. The Bible's woven into the very fabric of history, and that says something about its authenticity. And there's another thing that makes the Bible different. It's the only religious text that fits perfectly within history as we know it. It's not like those mythology stories that exist outside of time and place, the Bible. It's grounded in actual events and real people. If all truth is subjective, if there aren't any absolutes, what happens to our ideas about justice, morality, meaning in life? These aren't easy questions, but they're so important because how we answer those questions about truth, it really shapes everything about how we live. And that's really what this whole chapter is getting at. It's not about me like handing you all the answers on a silver platter, but more about giving you the tools so you can jump into the conversation and wrestle with these big ideas yourself and come to your own conclusions. So keep searching, don't shy away from the tough stuff. Dive into chapter 17 on your own and see where it takes you. And until next time, keep diving deep.